for a presentation, oh, I'm the speaker, by the way, for a presentation on the Roosevelt girls of Meadow Croft. And here they are, these sweet girls who I love. Does anybody know their names? And I'm excluding some of you people over there. Don't be raising your hand, Richard Martin. Anybody know their names? Just curious if you guys know any background. Yeah. Pansy, right. Pansy is right here. She's the oldest girl. Then we have the youngest. Any guesses? Just curious again. Don't worry, it's not. This is Jean. She's the baby. She's the youngest. And this over here is Gladys. She's the middle child. Okay. So I have good news and I have bad news for you. The good news is I did a ton of research and there's a ton of information. The bad news is there's so much information I couldn't squeeze all the girls into one presentation. So what this is going to be is we have to break them up a little bit. All right. So you're going to be seeing part one of this presentation today. Otherwise we'd be here for 5 hours. Okay. So we're going to focus in on Pansy today. All right, I hope that's okay with everybody. I hope nobody's going to march out and say, I want all 3 girls. All right, but we're going to focus on Pansy because I found so much new research on her, and I'm very excited to present it to you. And it's stuff that only a couple of people in the room know right now, so it's kind of exciting. Even the Roosevelt family doesn't know some of this stuff, so we're eager. All right, we know what we're talking about. And I put as a subtitle for this, A Life Reconstructed. With a capital I in life, which I gotta fix. I put that title because Pansy, of all the girls, is the daughter we kind of know least about. We know interesting things about her, we know some sad things about her, but we don't have a full picture of her. When I think of the girls, I feel like I know who Gladys is, I feel like I know who Jean is, but Pansy is a little mysterious, and you're gonna see why through the presentation. And hopefully we'll uncover some of those mysteries today, but when we uncover them, there's gonna be more mysteries, so maybe we'll find out more information in the future. All right, so I wanna start off by giving you the background of the family, okay? So I'm not gonna go into the whole Roosevelt family because it gets very complicated. If you wanna know, Jerry McCluskey is over there, and later on you can sit with him and he'll give you everything about the Roosevelt family tree. But I just want to focus in on the main characters of our story today. So the main characters of our story here are, well, first of all, we have the girls down here, right? This is Pansy, okay? Here's Gladys, here's Jean. We'll talk about them a little bit throughout the presentation, and then again, they're going to get their own talk. But why don't we start back up here with Pansy's father? Pansy's father is John Ellis Roosevelt, who owned Meadow Croft with his wife Nanny. So Nanny and John are Pansy's parents. So we have mom, and we have dad. All right, so we're going to talk about some of these people throughout. So I want to try to get it into your head a little bit. Now, John and Theodore, Teddy Roosevelt, are first cousins. They actually grew up next to each other in New York City. And we'll see a picture of the house later on. They were very close. I'll prove it to you later, too. John's father is Robert Barnwell Roosevelt. Robert Barnwell Roosevelt owned his estate on Lotus Lake, on the east side of Lotus Lake. So we'll be talking about him a little bit also. So Anita's father is John. Pansy's mother is Nanny. And Pansy's grandpa is Robert Sr., okay? Now there's a Robert Jr., and that's Pansy's uncle, who is John's brother. So these people lived in Sayville and Bayport. So they're gonna play a little bit of a role in our story. I included this part over here because Teddy's going to enter our story a little bit, and just because John and Teddy were very close, and like I said, grew up next door to each other. Does that make sense for now? I know it gets a little complicated, but we'll keep moving on. This is an etching of the house where Teddy grew up. If you look right here, this is Teddy Roosevelt's childhood home. It's on West 20th Street, if I remember correctly. Anybody? All right, it's on West 20th Street.
He said east.
East 20th Street, thank you. So don't go to the west side. So it's East 20th Street. And over here, this is where John grew up. All right, so this is Pansy's father's house. And you can see they grew up right next door to each other. Families were very close. And a lot of people say that Teddy was really influenced by, Teddy who lived here, was influenced by John's father, Robert. He was an outdoorsman, much like Teddy. But this isn't a presentation about them. This is what the buildings look like now. Teddy Roosevelt's birthplace was destroyed, but then reconstructed in the 1920s, if I remember correctly. You can see the house that John grew up in has kind of lost its entire facade there. It is now part of the Teddy Roosevelt Birthplace Museum, so you can go there and visit that. So to show the closeness of the families, we're going to go out to Oyster Bay, over here to Tranquility. Tranquility was the home of Theodore Roosevelt Sr. It was their summer home in Oyster Bay. It's kind of what got them started out there in Oyster Bay, to the best of my knowledge. And I'm showing you this because of the next picture, where you're going to see our mom and dad, John and Nanny, sitting up here with their Roosevelt cousins. Kind of interesting. Look at this little table here. And look, there it is right there. So that's where they're sitting, just to give you a perspective on this. So here we have sitting here, we have John, who's dad. Here's Nanny, who's mom. They were married in 1879. At that time, John was 27, and Nanny was only 19. She must have just come out from her debutante ball, met John, and then they fell in love and got married. The other characters over here are mostly the Roosevelt cousins. This is Teddy, this is Elliot, okay, father of Eleanor, right?
I was gonna say that.
This is Teddy, although, I mean, they look like twins, don't they? Kind of difficult to tell them apart. And then we have Corinne, and we have Anna, whose nickname was? Bammy, right? So we have John here with all his cousins. This is, I don't even remember his name, but C. Oliver Iceland, who's a family friend and became a banker later on. So there they are on the porch. So this is 1880, and it shows you that they're hanging out there vacationing in Oyster Bay, okay? Remember, they were married in 1879, and by 1881, or in 1881, they are in Newport, Rhode Island. And while they're in Newport, Rhode Island, Anita Blanche Roosevelt is born. Okay, Anita, which who knows Pansy, was named after her maternal grandmother, whose name was also Anita Blanche. Okay, Anita Blanche Vance. And why were they in Newport? Well, they're wealthy, upper-class people, and that would be certainly a vacation destination, although I couldn't find any evidence that they went there afterwards. But Newport at this time, it was always a place for the wealthy to go on vacation. But in this year, in 1880, Mrs. Astor, Caroline Astor, and William Backhouse Astor Jr., they buy Beechwood, the estate up there. Mrs. Astor was the dictator of society events. So this is when Newport really starts to kick in, when the Vanderbilts start going up there and building all of their grand estates. 1880 to 81 is also when the casino was built. This is the casino, and this is, does anybody watch the Gilded Age on HBO? Have you seen that? There are a couple of scenes that are shot there, and you can see there's a tennis court, they play croquet, and all these other things up there. I couldn't find any other evidence of what they were doing up there. I couldn't find Pansy's birth certificate, which I was really hoping to find. But that's where she's born. And she's a great joy to the family. She's a great joy to Teddy. Remember, Teddy and John are very close. And Teddy is on his honeymoon in Paris, doing a tour of the continent. And here's Teddy over here on the right with his first wife, Alice Lee. And he's madly in love. They're having a great time. He gets word that his cousin's wife gave birth to Pansy. And I love this letter. He says, "Dear old Father John, I am heartily glad, but I can't quite get used to the idea of your being a father. You, the old-time Texan hunter, as father of a family. Well, nobody is more delighted than I. I am wild to see you and Nanny and the little new Roosevelt. Just think of it. Her career in life will be a success if good wishes can ensure it. A little jinx there, I think. And with such a father and mother as she has, I know there is no doubt about it. With warmest love to Nanny, to whom Alice is going to write, I am, my dear old friend, your affectionate cousin, Fee." So it shows, I love this because it shows the closeness of the family, the joy at the birth of Pansy. Pansy, in this section, in this group of Roosevelts, she's the first granddaughter to be born. And in fact, she's also Robert, John's father's first grandchild, and he's just as thrilled because he, living in Bayport at the time, Roosevelt is building another yacht for our bay to be named Pansy after his little granddaughter, which is really kind of sweet. And our Roosevelts were totally into boating, yachting. That's one of the reasons they were so close to the Great South Bay. They're building a yacht, it seems, every year, and we'll see that a little while later. This is Robert, or Grandpa's house, which is the house that was on Lotus Lake. It's no longer there, unfortunately, but this is where he was when he was building his yacht for his first grandchild, Pansy. Now, we have very few pictures of Pansy. In fact, we only have 3, and you've already seen one of them. All right, so and one of them's really bad, and we have none of her as an adult, which is really a shame. Hopefully one day we'll be able to uncover some of them. The earliest picture, and one of the few pictures, like I said, we have is this one, which has been colorized. I got this off the internet. I like the way it looked. The other photos looked a little bit too digitized. So here she is in about 1884. I'm assuming she's 3 years old. Would you agree? 2 or 3, something like that. So it's about then. And she's living in Manhattan with her parents at this time. Now, years go by, I couldn't find anything else in the newspapers, couldn't find any records through the state about her, until finally in 1890, on December 31st, 1890, she's attending a New Year's Eve ball at the Metropolitan Opera House. This surprised me because she's only 9 years old. So you would not think that a 9-year-old would go to something like this, but she's there. And it's really magnificent. This is the Opera House. You can see the arcade here, so you enter here, get a little trolley coming by. The party was planned by Ward McAllister, who was the guy who planned all the big parties for Mrs. Astor. And in fact, Mrs. Astor is here. 1,100 guests go to this New Year's Eve ball. The whole place is decorated like a grand forest with flowers and all the stuff. The orchestra's playing, so you can imagine how spectacular this would have been. And there is Miss Anita B. Roosevelt, so she's listed right there. And it has to be her. There is no other Anita B. Roosevelt. Remember, her grandmother is Anita B., but she's Anita B. Vance, and she would have been called Mrs. Samuel B. Vance because of the time. I didn't notice her parents being here, though. I think this might be a mistake, though. Mr. and Mrs. J.R. Roosevelt. Maybe it's supposed to be J.E. You'll find these small little mistakes here. So, but I just wanted to point that out. So in that same year, 1890, the property south of Grandpa's Lotus Lake property becomes available. So John and Nanny purchase what's going to become Meadow Croft. Okay, and they purchase it. Captain Woodward passes away. They purchase the acreage there. Robert, the father, sells him a little bit of other land there for a nominal fee, and the family has Isaac Green, our famous local architect who's done many of the buildings here locally and the churches, has Isaac Green design the front part of the house. This is the part we're all familiar with, okay? The part where the Roosevelts mostly lived. Back here is the original Woodward farmhouse, which was also reconfigured a bit, and it changed over the years. This, just to give you a perspective, when this was built in 1890-91, this is the master bedroom. This is the nursery, because Jean was born that year, the baby, so there was a nursery here. This room was probably Gladys's, who was only 2 at the time, but Gladys might have been in the nursery too. And then behind Gladys's room, that's where Pansy's room was. And we know it was definitely Pansy's room, and I'm gonna show you how we know in a second. So this is what the girls would have looked like in their second year staying at Meadow Croft. I know we already saw this picture, but in this picture, in this season, Pansy is 10, Jean is 1, and Gladys is about 2 or 3, depending on the month. Okay, and but just focus in one more time. Just to remind you, we're focused in on Pansy, so why don't you get a good look at her face again as we continue. Now, what was her room like? So this is where we have to uncover some things to reconstruct. Well, we're lucky because John, her father, kept a ledger of everything that he purchased for each room. So this is what was in Pansy's room: the northeast bedroom, which is Pansy's room, and that's how we know it was her room. And he bought a maple bed bureau washstand, 2 chairs, a table and a rocker, spring mattress, a towel rack, 2 bracket lamps, which would have been on the wall, and oil lamps because they did not have gas or electricity at this time. A rug, and he always says a Jantine rug, which I've looked up. I cannot figure out what this is, so if anybody ever figures it out, please let me know. A clock, a wash set, a pink wash set, and andirons with owls. So it was probably cast iron, and those andirons, they usually had like glass eyes, so when the fire was glowing, the eyes would glow. So pretty cool that we know it was in her room. The B, by the way, is for Bauman's Department Store, which was the catalog that Mr. Roosevelt would have ordered from. What does her room look like? I know some of you have seen it, but this is what her room looked like as we have decorated it with period wallpaper. We don't know the wallpaper that was in there, but this gives you a good idea. You can see a nice closet wardrobe, her bench seat here. If she looked out this window, this would have been cleared. She would have seen one branch of the Browns River, and later on a boathouse was out there. We have a bed. There she is. That's Gladys. And if we turn the other way, we can see every room had a fireplace. So that's where the owl andirons would have been. And that room over there we can imagine as being Gladys's. Now I'm not sure about that, but that's just the inferences that we have to make over time. Okay, so that gives us an idea of where they lived and what her life was like at that time. Now, what did they do for fun? Oh, riding, yachting, bicycles, and a million other things. So let's focus in on these first. Riding, all the Roosevelt girls were expert horsewomen, including Nanny. And it was always put in the newspaper about that. Here is another picture. I know it's terrible quality, but this is the best I could get. So this is Pansy Roosevelt in Merry Lakes. Now, I'm not sure if Merry Lakes is this cute little pony or is the actual cart that you see her sitting right there. And this back here, this is where, if you've been to Meadow Croft, this is the ladies' parlor. All right, so I put in about 1891 because it would make sense that, based on her size, that looks like that looks like what she would about the year would be. Okay. Other things I already mentioned, yachting. Here we are in 1895, and they're going to christen two new yachts. All right. Pansy's uncle Robert, John's brother, he's got a yacht called the Wanda, and then I don't want to get into this. It's kind of a long story, but her uncle, who's a half brother to her father, Granville Raleigh Fortescue. Let's just say this: John's father, Robert Roosevelt Sr., was not quite faithful to his first wife. That's a whole other presentation, though. All right. So so Granville Raleigh Fortescue is going to christen his boat the Marion, which is named after his mother, Marion Fortescue. And I think it's too confusing. All right. And we see that all the people are here. The family members are here, and we have Mom's here, Pansy's here, Gladys, and I like how they call Jean Jeannie here. So they're all down there for the christening. And Olga Roosevelt, who is Uncle Robert's daughter, she's there. She's 4 years old. And like any good parent would do, they gave her a bottle of champagne so she could be the one to smash it against the bow of the yacht, right? So, different time period. And there are a lot of other articles about yachting in the family. John Roosevelt, he was one of the co-founders of the Southside Yacht Club, which became the Sayville Yacht Club. And it was founded actually in Meadow Croft. So that's pretty exciting. So we can see how much the family loved being on our Great South Bay right here. Other things they loved doing: bicycle riding. John was an avid bicycle rider, and so were the other members of the family. Here's a little bicycle parade that they had. They dressed up, they decorated their bikes with ribbons. They decorated their bikes with ribbons, and you can see John Roosevelt, who is considered the most graceful bicyclist in Sayville, had been selected to lead the bike ride. So they are totally into bicycles. They love bicycles. And in case you forgot, this is where it was held at St. Anne's Church. And after they had their bike ride through town, so just imagine Roosevelt's and all the Sudans, the Posts, all these upper class people riding around Middle Road, going back with their decorated bicycles. and then having tea in the grove behind St. Anne's Church. So not a bad way to spend an afternoon. In fact, Grandpa Roosevelt, Robert, even though he's an old man, he's an ardent bicyclist, and he joins all the young people, and he's riding around town all the time with them also. And we see here's Pansy. The two other girls aren't here. You can notice how Gladys and Jean aren't mentioned yet. They're too young. All right? And I think the next few things really, I kind of think show a closeness between Pansy and her father, which warms my heart a little bit if we want to infer this. Because the bicycle stories continue. John was in charge, or in co-charge, of the Michaud Bike Club. That was a bike club in New York, and it was a very high-class, upper-class society bike club. They had their own building where you could go and ride around. You can see this is from 1896. This etching or this print is from Harper's Weekly. So this shows, I'm not saying that they're in here, but this shows what the place would have looked like as they're riding around. The ladies with their skirts, the men, notice how the men are wearing their knickers, I guess. And this was a costume party, and it says up here that Pansy was a most dainty Dresden shepherd. So just to give us an idea what that could look like, I found this little China doll, and that's what a Dresden shepherd. So imagine Pansy looking a little bit like that as she rides around. Here's another print from the same magazine. So you can see here, they're doing some type of a drill. You can see they're running in line. This guy's giving a signal, so this guy's coming off, and everybody's having fun. In the bike club, they didn't just go there. They actually took field trips. They would meet at certain places and go for rides around the city. So, big time bicycling. This is one of my favorite things that I found. Mr. John Roosevelt and daughter are riding a fine new Columbia tandem. The daughter has to be Pansy because Gladys and Jean are way too young. So this makes me feel very happy because it shows the closeness between John, the father, and Pansy, the daughter. And the trust that you have to have, if anybody's ever ridden one of these with someone else, that you have to ride this. So when we look at this bicycle, and by the way, this is exactly what it would have looked like. This is from 1896 and it's new. So I found the catalog for it. And you can see Pansy would have sat in the front. You can see the bar coming down because she would have been wearing a skirt, and Dad's back here. And now the brakes, there are no coaster brakes back then. They were invented for a few years later. But you have the handbrake. This is called the spoon brake. If you look right here, it almost looks like a spoon. So Pansy's in charge of the braking. So I think that's a lot of trust. She's 15, right? So we know she's good at riding a bicycle. And so when they brake, kind of push this down, this lever pushes this down onto the tire. The tires are white, by the way, just because natural rubber is white. So most tires back then for bicycles were white. The other cool thing about this, talking about technology, you can see the skirt guard here. Notice how John doesn't have one? And we looked before, remember the men were wearing the knickers, so his pants wouldn't have been caught here. And this is actually string that would protect the skirt from going into the chain from locking it up. But I just like these couple of articles because it shows John hanging out only with Pansy. So, and from all accounts, he was a good father. After he died, Jean had written a very nice obituary about him, which maybe we'll talk about in our third installment. Okay. So,
wasn't that unusual for the day?
For what?
For wealthy parents to be close to
yes,
their kids?
That's exactly right. Because when you see, the distance, that was the mother's job. So when you see him doing these things, that's why and especially as a father of a daughter, it makes me very happy to see the evidence, of that. So now she's getting older. She's 16. Well, by the time she's 18 or so, she's got to come out to society. She's got to become a debutante so she can start being courted by gentlemen because, unfortunately, that was pretty much the only thing that women could do. Although we'll see differences in the two other sisters. All right, so lunches, dances, dance classes, cotillions and balls, oh my. She is so busy during this period in her life. There were too many articles. At first, when you're reading the articles, it's very exciting and fun. But after you've read like 3 dozen of them, and they're all just doing the same thing, it kind of gets a little boring, but you kind of, this is just 20 articles, and it's nothing. I have dozens more, but I just want to throw this up here to show you how busy she was, what her social life was like. So she's going to dance classes, dances, cotillions. Like I said, she's going to luncheons. And these are all to prepare her for her introduction into society when she is considered a woman. I guess we can say it's the infant in society, what is doing in society. This is the gossip pages of the day. So the regular people, the middle class people will be reading, these were the celebrities of the time. Every time there was a ball, they listed what the women were wearing by alphabetical order. It's really pretty amazing. The first assembly ball, which you see right here, and then there's a second assembly ball. The assembly balls really started off the winter season. Many of the debutantes came out to society in November and December, and then the season really started, and you'd have these grand balls at these grand hotels. This one was held in the Astoria Hotel, before Waldorf Astoria. So let's take a look at some of the places that Pansy would have seen when she went to these events. Here's the Waldorf and here's the Astoria. They're originally two separate hotels. It's a big family brouhaha about why this happened that I'm not going to get into because it's its own presentation. But this is where she would have gone to that first assembly ball, or the first one. So you can see that's not too bad of a place to hang out for an evening. And of course, Mrs. Astor was there, Ward McAllister, the whole shebang. Another place that she was at a lot was Delmonico's, a restaurant that was visited by the upper class and society people. All right, so this would be another one. And after she was introduced to society, she starts having luncheons for her young girlfriends at the Metropolitan Club. Metropolitan is a private club in Manhattan. The Roosevelts were members of it. It still exists today, and you can't go in unless you're a member. In the back part of this, they built a women's annex, so they would have women's events back here. And I think it actually went up here, because it predates that. That's what it looks like nowadays, which you can see is pretty much the exact same thing. So this is another place that all the Roosevelts would have went, and indeed she went to parties and dances here. The final place I'm going to show you is Sherry's. Of all the research I've done, this is the place she was at the most. Sherry started out as an ice cream company, then gained more money, and he eventually opened up a restaurant, then another restaurant, until he was one of the largest restaurateurs that society people went to. And you can see here's the arcade where they would have gone into. You can see how high this is here. But she was at Sherry's a lot, I noticed. And wouldn't it be great if you could see the inside of a ballroom? Well, here it is, okay? So 1898, so this is really the time we're talking about, 1898, when she would have been 17, going up to 18 and 19 and 20. So this is a room that Pansy would have been in and seen when she was going to these cotillions and dances and balls, okay? Now, when did she come out to society? This is what has been a little confusing to me. So maybe Mary Lou can talk to me later about this. Don't worry, I'm not gonna put you on the spot now. But it gets a little confusing with what's a cotillion, what's the debutante ball. What it seems to me is that a girl could be introduced to society, but then have her ball later on. So I could not find any evidence of this is Pansy Roosevelt's debutante ball, okay? But what I did find is this, by the way, this is Jean Horton's, so I kept it in here. And it says, Miss Anita Roosevelt, daughter of John and Mrs. Roosevelt, will be introduced at a reception at the Roosevelt residence, 675 Madison Avenue, early in December. So once you're introduced, that means you're allowed to partake in the full society. Other articles that I found that are from later on say, oh, she had made her she was introduced to society in 19 churches. So the years changed a little bit, but this is the one that I'm gonna stick with because she would have been 18 at the time and it makes the most sense, okay? I'm not saying that new research won't change this. Now, what did that house look like on 675 Madison Avenue? Well, this is it right here. And where was it? I'm just gonna go right to the next slide. Just to give us an idea, here it is, that little white dot right there. So you can see they're only 1 block away from Central Park. So that's not too bad of an area to go for a stroll or a horse ride, as we'll see also. So this is, this picture's from 1940, it's the best picture I get. The building is still there. This, of course, was now a storefront, but it was an entryway. It was a regular townhouse for the Roosevelt. So that's where she was introduced to society. Other social activities, as if she's not doing enough. All right, these girls are constantly active. She, of course, like most of you, were members of the Knickerbocker Riding Club. And this is Dorling's Riding Academy. It's in Columbus Circle, so not far from their home. And this, she went for a ride. This is from 1900. And the ride began, we're going for a ride. And look, of course, when you go horseback riding in your fancy place, the orchestra plays while you're riding around, right? Same thing at the Michaud Bike Club, by the way. There was an orchestra playing. All right, so not too bad. And we can see Pansy's name there. And one of the names, I tried to look at this guy, but I couldn't find much about him. But if you want an old money name for New York, how about Schuyler Van Rensselaer? I mean, that's not, that seems like the real deal right there. As we continue, not only that, but Pansy, like most of us, loved bowling. She was in the Monday Evening Bowling Club. Now, I have to be honest. I don't know if bowling like we know it in the bowling alley did exist. This was at the tennis building, so was it lawn bowling, which society people would have done, or was it this type of bowling? I'm not sure, but she was also in that club, and she's going, at this time, she's going once a week to the bowling club. All right, she's going to the riding club. She's also, like all our Roosevelts from Sayville, is a member of the Meadowbrook Club, which is in Westbury, Brookville kind of area. So she likes to ride to the hounds, right? Like most of us do. I know it's a Sunday. Usually after church, you run out there and you go riding to the hounds, right? And so I appreciate you being here. And I found this. These are little postcards that they would send members to tell them when the hunts are and when the rides are. And if you look in this middle one, it says Meadowbrook Drag Hounds. I always thought, when they rode to the hounds, that meant they were hunting foxes, because that's just in my head. What a drag hound was a hound that was trained to follow a scent. So they would, the people who ran the clubs would drag aniseed, bags of aniseed, all through the whatever grounds. You can see they went different places. They didn't just go to the club. They would travel to different places, would drag it around, and then you and your hounds would chase that scent. So a lot of fun. And this just is a little picture. This is a little bit later. It's from the 30s, but it is the Meadowbrook. These are the Meadowbrook hounds at the Meadowbrook Club. So I just wanted to give us an idea. So meanwhile, back at Meadow Croft, what's going on? Now she's out to society, right? So she's like an adult. And if we look over here, we have her mom, Mrs. Ellis Roosevelt, having a small luncheon for local people. The Chittendens, who I'm not sure who they are, but Walter Sudan, Mrs. Walter Sudan, who lived, the house is still there around the corner. Mrs. Charles Post, who lived at the end of Ocean Avenue, that house is gone. There are certain outbuildings that are still there. Mrs. John H. Prescott, who was married to John Prescott, the Reverend from St. Anne's Church, right next door to Meadow Croft. And Mrs. Wood, who was married to the realtor and insurance broker for Bayport, Sayville, Blue Point area. But you can see here how her life is changing, because Mrs. Vance, her grandmother, Nanny's mother, and she are assisting in the luncheon. When she was younger, she would not have been allowed to do that, but now she's older, she's been introduced to society, so she can do that. Okay? Other interesting thing, a year later, this is a letter that is written from John, Pansy's father, to Teddy Roosevelt while he's president. And if you know, Teddy's oldest daughter, Alice, was very important, was a huge celebrity at the turn of the century, was making her debutante ball, and John writes to his cousin, Teddy, "I expect to take Pansy on for your coming out ball to Alice on January 3rd, and we will spend a few days in Washington about that time, when I hope to have a chance to have a little chat with you, although you are President of the United States," right? So maybe you don't have time, so he's kind of like throwing that in there. So this is evidence that, and there are other articles that are published that Pansy and Eleanor and some of the other Roosevelt cousins did go down for that debutante ball. But now we get to 1903. Retirement from society. So everything seems to be fine. Everything's going along well, but why is Pansy retiring from society? What does that mean? Well, this is in the Suffolk County News. The illness of Miss Roosevelt. According to the following from a New York paper, Miss Pansy Roosevelt, daughter of Johnny Roosevelt, a cousin of the president, is suffering from nervous prostration and is being treated in a sanitarium in New York. She is 20 years old and is well known in society, as we saw from before. She is a well-known rider and took part in many runs of the Meadowbrook Hounds. The family lives at Meadow Croft, and the young woman's absence has been noticed. It was supposed that she was away with friends until recently, when friends of the family admitted that her health had caused her retirement from society for the winter. When she recovers, she will probably take a trip to Europe. Well, why not? Just I go to Europe afterwards when I'm better. I found some other information, but I'm not sure it's accurate, that she actually was put in the sanitarium in October of 1902. She had been there for a while. I'm not sure if that's the correct date, but she certainly was in the sanitarium before this date because it said she was in there. So she suffered from nervous prostration, which begs the question, what is nervous prostration? Well, if we take a look here, this is older, but it holds true. This is a doctor in the 1860s saying, here are the causes of nervous prostration. Excessive mental labor, especially when conjoined with anxiety, deficient nourishment, ranks first. It is also traceable to depressing emotions, grief, domestic trouble, prolonged anxiety, embarrassment, hemorrhage and debilitating diseases, depressing mental influences and sleeplessness, they throw malaria in here. I guess people with malaria have suffered from this too. What are the symptoms? A general malaise, impaired nutrition and assimilation, muscular atonacity, so you're getting flabby because of your malaise, change in the expression of the countenance, I'll skip that part, neuralgias of debility, cerebral anemia, lack of blood to the brain, hyperasthenia, which is, let me look up that one again, an abnormal increase in your sensitivity to light and the senses, mental depression, impaired intellection, melancholia, and mania. In general, this was like kind of a blanket nervous prostration for a nervous breakdown, burnout, something like that. So let's,
Women.
yeah.
Female, sounds like menopause.
Yeah, right. Well, both men and women could have this, but it was looked at differently, and we'll take a look at that. But yes, you picked up some of there are some issues that women might have that men wouldn't, but both could suffer from this. Remember, this is before psychotherapy. This is a very different time in our history. It's not like you go to a psychiatrist and talk to them or a therapist at this time. So let's take a look here. So let's focus in again on these symptoms. Physical exhaustion, profound fatigue, weakness, and nervous exhaustion. Depression, irritability, anxiety, and inability to concentrate. Nervous headaches, dyspepsia, indigestion with flatulence. Everybody had gas if you had this. That's what they came out with everything. Insomnia, hot and cold flashes, and trembling muscles. Intense fears, including fear of society, agoraphobia, fear of being alone, or generalized apprehension. Specific issues are over here. Okay, and treatment changes over time for this, which is very interesting and a little bit daunting for someone who doesn't have a psychology background. So what would the treatments be? And again, treatments change over time. Women, you would have the rest cure, which means for 6 to 8 weeks you'd be totally secluded, enforced bed rest, sometimes with bed pain, so you don't even get up for that. Overfeeding. One of the doctors I saw, he would give for the first few weeks, you would just drink whole milk. That's all you were allowed to have to reset yourself. If you were lactose intolerant, you could have 18 eggs a day.
Oh my God.
So it sounds like fun. Overfeeding. Electrotherapy. Your muscles are getting flabby. What do? They come in with the electrotherapy and your muscles jump. But you're staying in bed because we don't need you walking around. You gotta rest. All right? Patients were forbidden to read, write, or engage in any creative activity. We know that's bad for you, right? We're going to see that. That was sarcasm, by the way. That wasn't me. All right, just to be sure. I was like, oh my God, that was a jerk. All right. Now the rest cure and the candy cure. This was for us men, because when we're depressed, we like to go out and do stuff. All right. Now men were rarely sent to bed. Instead, they were encouraged to engage in a sturdy contest with nature by going west, hunting, fishing, riding, and living in the wilderness to restore that masculinity and vitality. You ladies stay in bed. I'm gonna go kill something. That'll make me feel better. We have the electrotherapy for men and women. We kind of talked about this to stimulate the muscles, reset the nervous system. And we talk about these nervous disorders that it really was connected to the nervous system. Now we consider more mental health, things like this. We can work things out like that. Nerve tonics, well, look, you have all these remedies, but there were dangerous things in there. You could have strychnine, right?
Of course, right.
That's great. Arsenic, bromide, cannabis, morphine, and cocaine. Well, it gets better as it goes along, I guess. But depending on your point of view. I mean, hydrotherapy, taken to the waters or spas, cold baths, all these types of things to reinvigorate yourself. And after you got through all this therapy, your adjustments were the physicians advise patients to now you stop worrying. Enough of this worrying, right? You would sleep more, eat more vegetables, exercise, take vacations, and avoid alcohol and nicotine. Now these were the earlier treatments. Later on it changed, and we'll talk about that. All right? Okay, here are some of the sufferers of nervous prostration. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, who wrote the Yellow Wallpaper about this, she was actually given the rest cure. And she wrote a novel based on this, and by the end, the woman goes so crazy.
She's like peeling the wallpaper.
She tears the wallpaper. It becomes a prison for her, which it would for anybody. So it actually makes her worse. All right. Emily Dickinson. That would make sense. She was a recluse. Horace Greeley, Go West young man. After his wife died, suffered Great Depression. Ulysses Grant, early in his life. Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women, right? Marcel Proust, French memoirs, Remembrance of Things Past. Edith Wharton, who wrote all about the Gilded Age. She suffered from this. Walt Whitman, that was in the Anton Chekhov, the Russian playwright. And Theodore Roosevelt, who I put a question mark there. Remember the West cure for men to go do things? If you're familiar, when he was young, he did a lot of that stuff to try to overcome his asthma. But after that, I believe it was 1884, that Alice Lee, his first wife, died the same day that his mother died. So his daughter Alice, he gave to Bammy, his sister, to take care of. And I'm not saying that he was diagnosed with this, but he went out to the Badlands and became a rancher and really did do that, whether it was recommended to him or he just did it on his own because he's Teddy Roosevelt. And he spent a few years out there. And so I put the question mark there because I'm not suggesting that he was diagnosed, but it would make sense. And he was devastated when on that day. All right. So here's some of the medicine you can take. See, I told you there's strychnine in it, so that's good for you to take. So the rest cure versus the work cure. Okay, over here, this is a presentation by an eminent English physician. And to get to your point about women, the seeds of this really terrible disease were in 99 cases out of 100 sown and watered during the period of education and training of girls at and after a critical period of life. Such cases were more frequent than the introduction of the system of higher education of women. For the advocates of this made the great mistake of assuming that there was no real difference between girls and boys between the ages of 14 and 21, suggesting girls can't handle this type of education, their brains can't work this way. All right. He mentioned the frequent occurrence of cases of anemia and breakdown among girls attributed to this excessive mental work and lack of exercise, which it struck me as interesting because I watched the Artemis re-enter our atmosphere and land. And when you looked at NASA, I don't know if you noticed, but most of the engineers and the scientists happen to be women. So I guess they got over this. So that's kind of a thing. Or maybe this was wrong, I don't know. It just goes to show the sexism of the time. But in a way, this guy was kind of good because look what he suggests for women. He advocated golf, cycling, lawn tennis, and other games. So he's not advocating that rest. He's advocating that women need to do these things also, to get out there, to be active, for their cure. So what happens after she gets out of the sanitarium? I'm not sure how long she was there. The typical treatment was 6 to 8 weeks, as I think we saw. She doesn't appear too much in the paper. She appears a couple of times. She is here listed as going to New Year's Eve and New Year's Day at the White House with some of her other female Roosevelt cousins. Eleanor Roosevelt's going also. You can see Pansy here. So this is after the treatment. Remember, our article that said she was in a sanitarium was from the beginning of this year in January. Now it's Christmas. Is she going there? It doesn't say she definitely went, but she's supposed to be going. Now this is from 1904, and this is from a group of ladies who run the Children of Loving Service, and they're having a fundraiser at Madison Avenue for the Country Home of Convalescent Babies. And put the arrow here. No, darn it. And Pansy is right here. So we see she's doing a few things, it seems. All right, can't be 100% sure. And if you notice, her cousin Olga, right, is there too, and Gladys is old enough, so she starts going. But Jean is still young. This picture certainly is not of the time period; it's from the 50s. But this organization is still in business in Seacliff, and it's kind of like a foster care type of way. They place children, so it's kind of nice that it's still in business. Now, 1910, we know that she was not in a sanitarium, because this is the 1910 census when they were living at 818 Madison Avenue. And you can see right here, this is from the other page. This actually should be on the top, it was on the previous page. You can see the parents here. But here is Anita Blanche Roosevelt. You can see she's 28 at the time. Gladys is 21, and Jean is 18. So she's living with the family at this time. So she's not in a sanitarium. My guess is that she would have been in and out during this time, because she's not, this is all I found from these 7 years. What did that house look like? Just to get an idea. This is, so they moved further uptown. Where's the house? See, they moved further uptown. And there's the original house that we saw earlier. So they're moving a bit more up, and they are still right across a block away from Central Park. So that was the 1910 census. 2 years later, 1912, tragedy strikes the family at Meadow Croft. Nanny, her mother, Pansy's mother, is suffering from typhoid, and she passes away there in September of 1912. And that's what I have to say about that. So I thought I had something else. It's on the next slide. Oh, wait, here it is. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. All right. So thank you. Her husband and two of her daughters, Gladys and Jean, were there when she died. Pansy's not there, but wait, look down here. She is survived by her husband, Gladys, Jean, and Pansy's mentioned, but why wasn't Pansy there? She wasn't married. She wouldn't have been living on her own. This didn't happen in society. So where is she? Well, they probate the will the next month, and that's where we find out where she was. The will, the entire estate goes to Gladys and Jean. But why not Pansy? So everything goes to them. And we look down here, so there's that. And then we look down here, there was another daughter, Anita Roosevelt, of Central Valley, New York. But she is not mentioned in the will as receiving any bequest. Well, I mean, why wouldn't she receive it? We know she had some difficulties, but what's going on with her? So then I thought, why would she be in Central Valley? Well, we know she was in sanitariums, so I said, let me look up sanitariums in Central Valley. And indeed, there is one, and there's only ever been one in Central Valley. And it still exists. So I drove on up there. Yeah.
Is that one near Saranac Lake?
No, that's further north.
Okay.
Central Valley is about 2 hours north of here.
Okay, so there was one there too.
Okay. And there were several upstate. This is the one though, well, and it was called Falkirk. So I drove up there and was very excited, found it on Google Maps. I said, I'm gonna go see Pansy, this is great. And this is the entrance. I thought, wow, this is spectacular. It's 125 acres of wooded property. And I was so excited and happy to be there. You see this little plaque here, if you look up closer, Falkirk in the Ramapos. So excited to see this. So then I said, oh, go back to this. Now I'm gonna drive up here, I'm gonna go, and the building that she was in still exists. So I couldn't wait, it was on my GPS, I could see, and I started driving up. So I'm driving up, oh, there's a sign there. And then I'm driving up, and private prop. So I had to keep going. I kept going. And I'm telling you, it's beautiful. There are small houses. I think I was saying to Mary yesterday, it's like when you hear words like Dale and Glen and Brook, like that's what I thought about. It was just the best place. I wish I had nervous prostration. It was fantastic. Like, I probably have like time, but it's fantastic. So I kept going, and then I was getting deep in there, and there's a sign on every tree. And I'm going, what is this? I'm seeing trucks, and I'm like, what's going on over here? And then there are cones in the middle of the road, and I said, all right, I better stop here. So, but guess what? I have plenty of pictures of it anyways to show you where she would have been. And this is the building I was looking for. This building is called Stan Lee, and this is the building that the women stayed at. I told you it was called Falkirk in the Ramapos, and that was true until 1906 when Dr. Carlos McDonald bought it. He called it the Dr. McDonald House. Not just this house, but the whole property he called that. Now he was a little interesting character, a doctor of the time. This is his picture. This is from a card from the hospital or from the sanitarium in Central Valley. You can see that. The telephone number's there if you want to try calling later, see if you get up there. But he buys Falkirk in 1906. He sells it in 1920 to Charles W. Pilgrim State. So he buys it in 1920. Dr. McDonald, he enlisted at the age of 16 in the Union Army, and he fought at Antietam and Gettysburg. So pretty brave guy, and you'll see the connection there in a little bit. He was the president of the New York State Commission of Lunacy for a while. Sorry, that's what it was called. He was a professor at the mental disease at Bellevue Hospital, which of course still exists. He was the president of the American Medico-Psychological Association, which is now the American Psychiatric Association. And he was the president of that from 1912 until 1914. So that was when Pansy was here. He was known as a skilled alienist, which is what they called psychiatrists back then. And he lectured and published on insanity and legal responsibility. You'll see he's in the paper a lot. When someone's charged with a crime, he's a doctor that's frequently hired to judge if you're insane or you did it of your own volition. In fact, he was so important in this that he was a member of the New York Medical Legal Society, and he worked on the development of the first electric chair. Isn't that great? He specifically worked on the composition, the makeup, and the placement of the electrodes that you put on the prisoner. So it's kind of interesting that this is the guy you're going to for help, but you know. He was the attending physician at the first execution using electric chair, so he's one of these guys standing up over there. Anybody know this guy?
That's Leon Chisholm.
Can we say it?
So go.
McKinley's assassin or Rothwell?
McKinley's assassin. Yep, you got it. Right, the guy who assassinated McKinley in 1901. So his name is it's pronounced Leon Czolgosz. I had to write it down because I practice it a lot, but I just couldn't say it. And so he examined Leon and determined that Leon, guess what? He was not insane, so he could be executed with the electric chair. And he was the attending physician at his execution also. Now, remember I said how Dr. McDonald was in the Union Army. So he was in the Grand Army of the Republic, so they would have meetings. He's from Ohio, and this is a letter that Dr. McDonald sent to Colonel Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, in 1911, a little bit before the time that we know that Pansy was there. So I was like, wow. I was praying that he mentions Pansy, but he doesn't. But he does show how he has a connection with the Roosevelt family, which leads me to think, well, is that why Pansy was put there? Because the family knew him? And I'm not going to read all this. It just says, hey, we support you, you're great, we love you. Then it continues, in conclusion, I desire to say, as one who knew you well as an assemblyman and governor of New York, so way back when, that my admiration for and faith in you is even greater than it was before the recent election, and I feel sure the people in the near future will amply vindicate and sustain that you so courageously represent the something like that, all right? And it's signed by Dr. McDonald. So it's interesting because it shows he knew Teddy when Teddy was governor and assemblyman, which is going back into the 19th century. I couldn't find any other connection there, but when I found it, I thought, that's pretty interesting that there is a connection between the Roosevelt family and Dr. McDonald. Now, one question you might be asking, well, nervous prostration, 6 to 8 weeks, why is she there still? What is happening? Why, 1903, 1912? So, was it nervous prostration or dementia precox? Does anybody know what dementia precox is called now? That's it, schizophrenia. Don Weinhardt, our beloved president who founded our organization, published an article about the Roosevelt family in the 90s, and he says there that she suffered from, that Pansy suffered from dementia precox. And he did not cite a source for it though. When I started at Meadow Croft, that's what I had heard though also. So until I hear otherwise, I'm gonna agree with Don and say that she had schizophrenia, which is of course a lot more serious than having nervous prostration. The general treatment for schizophrenia is that the doctors and nurses would manage each episode. So I didn't want to get into that part too much. All right, so she had, maybe she didn't have this, but she had some other type of mental illness that was more serious than nervous prostration, which there were cures for, and over time you could find that. So she had something a bit more serious. And in fact, the family doesn't even know. Last year, Phil Roosevelt, who is the grandson of Jean, the baby, he was at Meadow Croft for a presentation that we were doing. And he said the story that he had heard from his family that Pansy, when she died, he didn't know anything about, growing up, that she suffered from any mental illness, but that she had died because she fell off the second floor of a barn. Yeah. So nothing was ever mentioned to him, so it was kind of an interesting thing. But let's go back and see what Pansy would have seen when she was at Dr. McDonald's house. This is what it looked like in the 50s, but it gives a good overview. This is Stanley, the house she was in, Falkirk, the memory here, and these were doctors' houses over here. You can see how bucolic it is and what a beautiful place is. The lake is still there. And this gives you a real good, this etching is fantastic because this shows Stanley, Falkirk where the men were, a stone tower, and this is actually a covered corridor that the men would walk down to go to this over here. This was the dining room for both. They probably ate at separate times. And this is a dining room. I'm not sure what was in here, but again, this is the house that Pansy would have been in. So we'll see better pictures of the covered corridor. The corridor is not there anymore. Again, nice little picture of the house she was in. The entranceway, and we're going to go in the house too. All right. Here's that dining room over here, that covered corridor going up. Here's what it would have looked like in color. This is a colorized picture here. And when I went to the Historical Society up there, I had a big box of stuff that I went through, and luckily I found this. They had a copy of this brochure that the facility would give prospective families of prospective patients. So there's a lot of information in here that I thought we should take a look at to see how Pansy might have been treating and what she would have seen. It's a strictly high-class private sanitarium for a limited number of selected cases of mental and nervous disease, which tells us upper class and white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. That's what's going to be there. All right, that's exactly what that kind of is. It's coded language all the time. And of course, money. Okay. On the next page, we see, other patients that would have been there. That upper class, I just found a couple. Ida Flagler was wife of millionaire oilman Henry Morrison Flagler. She suffered from incurable delusional insanity. Super wealthy, super wealthy. So these are the types of people that would have been in this facility. Joseph Robin, he was a financier. He was found legally sane and then sentenced to a year in jail. Roy Pierce, he was found insane, and he was the son of Henry Clay Pierce, he was the president of Waters Pierce Oil Company. So this is the class of people that are there. All right, the upper crust of the upper crust are staying there. There's another page in the brochure. It just describes the beautiful mountain walks, wooded ravines, trees, shrubbery, tennis courts, etc. Over here, this is what you get: sanitary plumbing, isn't that good? Open fireplaces, steam heating, lighting, drainage. You get drainage. Fire protection, solaria, steam heated in winter. You get hydrotherapy, I think it's hot air treatment, I'm not sure. Massage. The water supply is gravity fed from the mountains. Beautiful. Down here, cuisine, liberal and varied according to the needs of the patients, with private table or tray service as may be required. So you get served in your room if you want to. Milk and cream, gardens on the property, other things like that. Voluntary and committed patients are received. violent, dangerous, noisy, or otherwise objectionable patients will not be received, which gives us a little clue as to Pansy, so we can assume Pansy was not violent, dangerous, noisy, or otherwise objectionable. Okay? Where is this place? Where was this place? Up here you can see New York City's town here, so you can see where it is, right going up the Hudson River, right over here. This is the train line, the Erie Railroad, going down. Figured it would take in the family, if they visited her from New York City, it would take it a little over an hour. It's 49 miles away. So I'm assuming a little over an hour. Did the parents visit? Did the family visit? We don't have any evidence that they did, but they were close, so I would think that they did.
Could have been more than an hour because they didn't have the highways that we have today.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, right. And there are, you see other roads that go around there, you can get up there too. Okay? Again, here's that photo of Stanley. This is from the time that Pansy was definitely there. And if we want to walk inside of Stanley and see what it was like, here's the foyer, the east view, so you can walk in. You have, I mean, that's a sanitarium. It looks like a bed and breakfast that I would love to stay in. Right? And here we have the west. So this is the west view, and this is the east view. So you can see everything paneled, beautiful columns in there. This is the solarium that she would have sat at. You can see the layout there, all the beautiful plants. This is the dining room, so in the women's building, so you can see they had electric lights at that time. Here you have a nice drawing room, so you can go hang out there and look at the gorgeous fireplace. And this would have been, you can imagine maybe Pansy's room over here. And so you have the bed, a bureau, a chair, and you have this divan, so you could, fainting couch, so you could lay down and hang out there. So really a nice place. The grounds, we have these beautiful stone walls everywhere. This is great under the old apple tree. There's actually a bench built in here. Just to give you an idea what that looked like. I took this before, and then when I went in and was sneaking around, you can see, I mean, this is all through the property. It's really a stunning place to visit. And here's another one. I just wanted to show you a few more pictures of the property, what it looked like, that she could have walked around. One of the websites I went on said that at this facility, the patients would walk 8 hours a day. Not 8 hours, sorry, 8 miles a day. Not 8 hours, 8 miles.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah. Sorry, Pansy. Okay, I turn the road. So very, yeah, and just very beautiful. Okay, here's the promenade. Here's a better picture of that where it's been colorized, so you can see. Nice promenade to go for a walk in. And this is really kind of what it still looks like today. It was there. And you have this beautiful pavilion. I think this is Dr. McDonald sitting here. Probably one of the doctors. These next pictures are a little bit later. They're from like 1930, but I just wanted to show you them too. We had an occupational therapy room so people could work on things. Physiotherapy, so maybe it's where they got their electrolysis also. Massages. I don't know what these things are, but they don't look fun. That looks like a heat lamp. This thing, I don't think I want that near me. And this is the laboratory. So this is where they would mix up your strychnine potions and give them to you. Being active, croquet ground, clock golf. Does anybody know what clock golf is? I had to look this one up. Clock golf it's like a putting green, but you would have 12 stations to putt in. So like a clock, you go around, you have to hit them all in a row or go back to the beginning. So that's clock golf. Of course, a tennis court. And we have evidence the girls played tennis because at Meadow Croft we have Jean's tennis racket case. So now, between this time, and again, we don't know how long she was there. Between this time and 1925, we lose touch with her. She's not mentioned anywhere. She's not in any newspapers. I couldn't find her in any of the censuses. But I do know that in 1925, she reappears again. Before 1925, she was living in Flushing. I don't know, I'm assuming she was at a sanitarium there. I couldn't find any evidence of it. But I know that on March 23rd, 1925, she is in Dr. Harrison's sanitarium called Breezehurst Terrace. That's in Whitestone, Queens. That facility is gone. I do have a couple of pictures to show you, but that facility is gone. So this is the census from 1925, New York, and this is the doctor and his family, and the rest of these are employees, all right, of the facility. You can see how many employees there are, quite a few. This doctor here, S. Edward Fretz, we'll talk about him a little bit later, but he's the main doctor. As we go down the census, these are the first patients we see. Pansy's not mentioned here, so this is the same page. As of this census, on this page and the next that we're going to see, they had 27 patients. The facility could hold 35. So we're talking about, even up in Falkirk, they have that 125 acres. We're talking about the same amount of people. These are very exclusive places. And here we go. Here is our girl, Anita Roosevelt. She's listed here as 46 years old. That's a mistake. She's 43. You find these mistakes here and there, and that's okay. But here is Anita, and kind of interesting as we go over, we see Flushing, and we say, well, but it's in Whitestone. It's not in Flushing. But when you look at the head of this column, if you're the enumerator taking the census, these are your directions. It says, if an inmate of an institution, which Pansy was, enter the residence given when admitted. So before she was in this facility, she was in Whitestone. All right, and so just all these little clues and breadcrumbs that we still have to investigate. Here's what Breezehurst looked like. So again, another gorgeous place to stay, and it overlooked the Long Island Sound. So really a really nice place. It was established in 1890 by Dr. D.A. Harrison, who was listed on that census. By this time, he would have been about 72 years old. He was in his 40s when he started it. The hospital closed in 1931, and then the records went to Kings Park Hospital, which is now, I guess, closed down also. After that, they closed down, the records are in Albany. So they have records on Pansy up there. The problem is, you're not allowed to look at them. There's a regulation or law that people who were in these places have total privacy. So Phil Roosevelt, Gene's grandson, who I mentioned before, he's written a letter to them to try to get, saying, I'm concerned for my own family. If this runs in my family, I want to see. So he's waiting to hear back from that. But, I mean, you would hope there would be some grandfather clause. I mean, after 100 years goes by, you would think, okay. I understand people need privacy, especially if for mental illness and things like that. But I would love to have those records. Okay, here's just another shot of the facility. All right, and you can see over here it says that it's managed on the whole plane, which means kind of like Falkirk, where you'd stay there. You'd have your room, you'd have your meals, you'd have your activities, all of those types of things. And you see, they not only took mentally ill people, nervous people, but also alcohol and drug patients. All right, but unfortunately, one of my favorite Beatles said, all things must pass. None of life's strings can last. And indeed, Pansy is finally going to leave us. And here's her death certificate. So she passes away on February 2nd, 1929, at about 4 a.m. All right, so early in the morning. The cause of death, I don't know if you saw it over here, is influenza. And the doctor who reported it was the doctor we saw on the census, S. Edward Fretz, the house physician. He's the main doctor in charge. And usually when you see these things, there's an autopsy done. There's no autopsy done here. So he just writes that to the best of his knowledge, she died of influenza. And you can see he writes when she was admitted to the institution, that March 23rd, 1915. We have the parents named here, of course, her birth date. She was 47 years, 5 months, and 24 days old. So sadly, she passes away. I talked about that already. And then on the back of the birth certificate, or the death certificate, you can see that the undertaker is given charge by her sister, Jean Roosevelt. It had to be Jean because Mom passed away. Well, it could have been Dad. It couldn't have been Gladys. You'll find out about that next time. Dun dun dun. And so that was the information I found. The last little bit here would be where she's buried. She was buried the next day, so she died February 2nd. She was buried February 3rd, and she's buried in the family plot at Greenwood Cemetery. And here is her grave. But like I always like to think, I always like to remind ourselves that these are real people, and I just want us to take one last little look at our little Pansy when she was young, and and hopefully happy and thinking about riding her bike with her father. Thanks for listening to me. Does anyone have any questions? Richard?
What, the place in Central Valley, what is it now?
It is oh yeah, thank you. It's a private residence. It was bought by very wealthy people, a couple, who the Historical Society is going to contact for me to get me on the property. So hopefully we'll get on there and get more information.
They own the whole property?
They own the whole property. And Stanley, the house that Pansy was at, they rent it out. So when that entrance that I was at, there were all mailboxes there. So people live there. So I was like, should I go past the cones and pretend I live here? You know, but I don't know how these people are. You know. So yeah, so that the building still exists, and the name is the CORT, the courts. Dr. Ferguson's house, I believe, they converted into their private residence. The thing that stinks for me is when you look on Google Maps, it doesn't say, hey, these are private roads. It just looks like you could drive around up there. But hopefully I can get up there and get more information. The Historical Society was great. They had a ton of information, and it was really very helpful. And
So when you drove up there,
Yeah.
these signs, private property,
Yeah.
do not enter, was that all a surprise to you?
it was a big surprise to me.
So you're
Yeah.
just thinking, confronted by the fact that, I just did a 2-hour drive for
Right. Well, the thing, I went up there on a day I knew the Historical Society was going to be open, so I figured, all right, at least I had called them 2 weeks prior, but they didn't return my call. But we know how that works with people in historical societies. You're busy with other things. So I said, I have nothing to lose. I want to drive up there. I want to see it, and I don't mind an adventure. The worst thing is I had to wait at the diner for the historical. I wasn't even bad. I had good pancakes. The Historical Society to open, but it is there, and the buildings are there, and the grounds look just like the picture. They're gorgeous. I mean, it was a place I wanted to live at. It really was spectacular. The streams, the
Did you go in there in the summertime?
Oh,
With all the trees in bloom?
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, sorry.
Why was she being shifted around? Was it just to be closer to the family?
That I'm not sure about. Again, we can only make guesses and inferences. My guess would be that they tried one place, and maybe they didn't like the treatment there, so maybe they moved her someplace else. I'm really not sure.
Or if they got recommendations from a different place
Right.
that
Maybe.
showed improvement for someone.
Well, maybe Teddy Roosevelt said, hey, this guy, Dr. McDonald, he's a veteran. He's running a place up in Falkirk, so go up there. This is why I'm saying it's kind of like reconstructing the story, because you just can't be sure. I mean, the family doesn't even know this, what I just found out, which is pretty exciting. Like, they don't know about Falkirk and things like that, so I was really excited to find that out, yeah.
Just in response to this last question, I've been researching a family member who had relatives here in Bayport and lived upstate and so on. And from what I've read and pieced together as you have, at first I thought she was an alcoholic, but I believe she had tuberculosis. And in those time periods you're stating, there were places that just treated everything.
That's right.
And she, from what I read, was for a while at the facility at Saranac Lake, which had some really Frankenstein-like machinery that
Right.
you used. But she wound up in Selden.
Really?
Well, the main campus of Community was a tubercular
Oh, I didn't know
sanitarium
that.
and rescue
Okay.
for people. And so her loop was, relatives in Sayville, in Bayport, family in Manhattan, family upstate, and I think in the end, it was tuberculosis she fought for 20 years.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Isn't it fun to do research?
Oh my God.
Exactly. It's a lot of work, but when you find something, it's fantastic.
And it's exactly what you're saying. You get this tiny little bit, and then you have to ask 20
Yes.
questions. Why did they do
Right,
that?
yeah.
What else was happening? Who might have been involved?
Right. Well, and I'm sympathetic to you because my great-grandfather, William Giebfried, he passed away of tuberculosis. He was a Brooklyn brewer in Brooklyn, in Williamsburg. Yeah. One other thing I'll mention is that in 1880, New York, or 1880 or 1890, I'm sorry, I don't remember. But there was a law passed where if you were in an almshouse, which is a poorhouse, or a workhouse to pay off debt, things like that, you could not be suffering from a mental illness. So there are already asylums in New York State and other states, but at that time, a lot more opened up. So that's where we get the Pilgrim States, all these big hospitals at Kings Park opening up at these times because they had to be housed somewhere. So that was just another interesting thing. Now, Pansy was never in an asylum. She was in a sanitarium. Sanitariums in general are private places where mostly, you know, upper class and upper middle class people could afford. So, any other
Or at
questions?
least attempts at treatment.
Yes, and doing the best they could at the time. I mean, you think about it, not that I'm a great fan of Sigmund Freud, but he kind of went into a better direction with psychotherapy. This was really, you know, lay down, we're gonna hit you with electric shocks, you know? I mean, that's because they thought it would reset your system, but that's the best they knew at the time. And you think electricity was new when it's set. Well, it wasn't, not, it was new. Any other questions, comments? All right, let's do our